Now we're in claim 2. Claim 2 says that the first disciples were illiterate and therefore could not have written the parts of the New Testament attributed to them, right? Because how can illiterate people write?
Right. Or read.
Yeah.
And there's obviously no one else around them to help them with any of this. So.
That's right. Yeah. So they're on their own, and how could they do anything?
Right.
Yeah, right. Wondered how they got to be adults. Right.
So our authors here say that the literacy and education were of concern of first century Jews and were promoted for boys starting from the age of 6 to 7. Sociologists tell us that ethnic identity among minorities leads them to pursue careful passing on of the ethnic tradition to preserve their way of life.
Yeah, so that makes sense, right? So here they're an ethnic minority. Obviously, they're Jewish in a Roman world,
right? And
they want to keep their culture, and so they want to pass that along. And you have to at least be somewhat cognizant of how to do that verbally, especially, but maybe even in written manner, right? And there was the Old Testament.
Right. The New Testament just didn't appear out of thin air.
Right.
It was a continued tradition of this kind of covenant idea of these documents being almost agreements between the people and God. And so that continued on from the Old Testament. We saw that they held up special books in the temple that we call the Old Testament today. That's how we can know the Maccabees aren't in there, because the Maccabees were never laid up in the temple as things of authoritative. I'm not saying that they're bad or that they're not good history. They're important pieces. That's where we get the whole Hanukkah from and that story. But the fact that they weren't Maccabees, for example, wasn't viewed as God-breathed as the Old and New Testament documents are considered is important. It comes from a tradition of a written culture. Exactly. At least some people of that culture wrote things.
Yeah.
And also, archaeological discoveries in Galilee demonstrated that there was more of a concern with following Jewish practice and legal awareness than was once thought. So we see a historical backdrop of that as well. And this assumes a more literate culture, at least at an oral level.
Yeah.
And so I know Bart Ehrman has done his book study on this, but other people have done book studies have written books on this as well, and shown just how different we need to think about what an oral tradition or oral society looks like, and how much better people's memories are, especially without the squirrel gadget. What's that noise coming from my phone? Hold on. So
fewer distractions, right? That kind of stuff.
We need to kind of understand this from outside a Western 20th to 21st century eyes perspective. Yeah,
good. So, for instance, Ben Wetherington, our authors tell us, responds pointedly to Ehrman's specific argument that the first disciples were mere illiterate parents. He has a couple of points here. First, fishermen in that time were not peasants, right? They often made a good living from the Sea of Galilee, as can be seen from the famous and large fisherman's house excavated in Bethsaida. Mm-hmm. So, Secondly, fishermen were businessmen, and they had to either have a scribe or be able to read and write a bit to deal with tax collectors, toll collectors, and other business persons. Mm-hmm. So, they were businessmen, so they had to have, even they might have been backwoods, but
Right. Well, there's that joke of how do you know that the disciples spoke Greek? Well, if Jesus tells you that you have to carry the Romans pack not just a mile but 2 miles, if you're under legal authority to do it 1 mile, you better understand what he's saying.
Right.
So we at least know what pack in 1 mile is in Greek.
Yeah, good. And then thirdly, if indeed Jesus had like Matthew, right, Levi, and others who were tax collectors as disciples, they were indeed literate. Right? You had to be literate in order to do those jobs. And again, they were not peasants, right? In other words, it's a caricature to suggest that all Jesus' disciples were illiterate peasants.
Right. At what point in history do you stop calling people goat herders and that's all that they were, and just that's all that they did for every moment of their life was just look at goats?
Yeah.
Not really. Yes.